Greetings, everybody. This is Jordan Martinson, Program Specialist at TLPI. We're joined today by David Natsue and Ray Da for a discussion on transition to civilian and sober life. So David and Ray, you can take it away. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Jordan. So today, just that when we're looking at the transition from active military life and into civilian life, there can come a lot of obstacles, and so we'll take a look at some of that stuff and how to continue the camaraderie is what I like to say. You know, being a veteran or being a military member, you get really indoctrinated into a brotherhood, and when you transition out, that leaves you. And so by looking into pro-social activities that involve that same type of feeling, that same type of brotherhood, can bring back those feelings of belonging, because there can be a tendency to withdraw. And so we'll look at some of that, and then some of the other things that have to go with that, with moral dissonance. You know, just the idea of the purpose of service. You know, sometimes it's not always acceptable to the ways that we were socialized. So, Ray, do you have anything to add? Unmute.
I also want to welcome everyone to this session we have today, and I'm pleased to be working with Dave and Sean on this, and let's go ahead and roll with it. Thank you.
Okay, so yeah, as I said, my name is Dave Natsue. I'm from the Pueblo of Laguna. I was born and raised in Winslow, Arizona. I was served in the Navy for over 20 years and retired musician's mate. After my service, I moved to Albuquerque and enrolled in the psychology department at the University of New Mexico. And all the time not knowing that the University of New Mexico Psych Department was like the mecca of a lot of the methods that are used in the field in addiction studies. So the name that was given to me by my clan elders is Kuiesiwa, which is the motion that the parrot makes when it starts to take flight. And my big clan, my maternal clan, is Big Parrot, and then my paternal clan on my father's side is Kwayawashti, Little Bear. And I think one of the reasons I moved to Albuquerque was just to be close to home again. You know, I'd been gone for so long, you know, just to get back into the cultural practices and learning the things that I missed as I grew up. So welcome, thank you.
As noted here, my name is Ray Da. I'm Navajo from the Gallup area, Eastern Navajo Nation. I work in the behavioral health field as an administrator and trained as a clinician. And I'm a veteran of the U.S. Army. In fact, I mentioned earlier in another session that this week would have been 50 years ago, this week was my first week in basic training at Fort Polk, Louisiana. So I've been thinking about that often and the transition I've made through my life in the last 50 years to where I am today. But thank you everyone for joining us, and good to meet everybody. Go ahead, Dave.
So I kind of want to start this one off with a prayer. You know, we think about the people that we serve, the veterans that we serve, and this is just to kind of put us in the frame of mind, you know, when we move forward to working with the veterans, and you know, that we work together in a helpful manner. So. Guatsi, Naya, Sawajamshe. Guide me to be a patient companion, to listen with a heart as open as the sky. Grant me vision to see through his eyes and eager ears to hear his story. Create a safe and open meadow in which we may walk together. Make me a clear pool in which he may reflect. Guide me to find in him your beauty and wisdom, knowing your desire for him to be in harmony, healthy, loving, and strong. Let me honor and respect his choosing of his own path and bless him to walk it freely. May I know once again that although he and I are different, yet there is a peaceful place where we are one. Why? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Abby. So next. Okay, but I think before, you know, we can start looking at the pro-social activities. The thing about military members is they want to know, you know, they go through hours and hours and hours of training, and a lot of times they want to know, you know, why they're being trained. You know, what are they being trained for? So the reason to enter into pro-social activities is to start looking at the reasons that pro-social activities exist and their purpose. And one of their purposes is to get, one of the things that veterans experience is a dissonance in moral beliefs, or and we'll discuss moral injury here in a second, but just getting away from those moral beliefs that we were raised with, you know, to take care of each other, to take care of the other person, to take care of the land. So in Caris, in Laguna, you know, what's taught is kutsatish kutsatsina, which is it's not about me, you know, it's not about you. It's about taking care of the other first before taking care of self. And you know, when we join the military, these belief systems, they start to break down. And just, you know, using Western examples, when you're looking at like Kohlberg stages of moral development, you know, there's in the pre-conventional, conventional, post-conventional stages, the needs, looking at the needs of the other person, you know, the needs of self and the needs of the other person, looking at the rewarding good behavior, you know, conforming to social norms, the things that we're taught as we're growing up. The emphasis on upholding law and order and authority, and doing your duty to hold up these social rules that we're raised with, you know. You know, I can remember times, you know, my mom, my grandmother, you know, the way they talked to us about the way we treat each other. And when we're kids, we're fighting around and stuff, that you're supposed to be taking care of your brothers and sisters. You're supposed to be helping out your mom or helping out your dad, and each gender has roles, that type of thing. And then just being able to live by that during the as you grow. So Ray, do you have anything to add on that?
Thank you, Dave, for really doing a great job on how morals is central to how we develop, and certainly true for our people, Native people, because we're raised, like you said, to respect and honor life and living, and so many of us who are Native and entered the military understand that. But I think you covered it all, Dave. Thank you very much. Go ahead.
Yeah, so next slide.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ray Dahl Navajo from the New Mexico. I want to welcome everyone again also. And I'll do the prayer. My clans are, in Navajo, we introduce our clans.
Sounds like Ray's on another web too. So moral injury. So the act of transgression that creates dissonance and conflict, because it violates those assumptions, those beliefs that we were grown up with. So when you're talking about the warrior experience, when you're talking about what you learn when you join the military, it starts in boot camp and then moves on to maybe specific types of training that you're going to be doing for whatever your job is. In the Navy, it's known as the Navy Enlisted Code, NEC, and then in I know Army side and Marine Corps side, MOS. So the idea, just getting into boot camp and just the idea of the violence, that can exist, or the idea of killing another human being, these all go against our moral beliefs that we've been taught as we were raised, and one of the things that comes to mind is that when you do like small arms training, the targets that you shoot at in small arms training, they're not bullseyes. They're not circular with a dot in the middle. They're shaped like people. The targets that we shoot at, it's shaped like another human being, and you score hits the closer you can get towards the center, like towards the heart. The higher your score is. So, these kind of things can start to trigger that moral injury. So, and it's things that that you start to realize are morally questionable, and ethically ambiguous, in situations that just arise in the training and in actual in warfare, and then along with that is the idea of, we're taught to take care of the earth. We're taught to take care of Mother Earth too, because Mother Earth provides for us. It's where we grow our food, and the earth has everything that we need to survive. And then now when we're talking about warfare, we're talking about against other human beings, we're talking about the destruction of their land and the destruction of their resources, their traditional homelands, and destruction of their culture, which adds on to that moral injury, and it starts to create that the conflict, the moral conflict, or the moral dissonance. So but there was a question that came up the other day in one of the other webs, the difference between the conflict and the dissonance. So I thought about it, and being involved in a lot of music all my life, I noticed, like when you watch movies, you watch TV, there's always music behind it that can set the emotional background for whatever type of situation. So I thought that just providing just a small musical example of what that sounds like, or and then what it feels like. So excuse me, I have to move over to my piano here. So so when you're looking at moral conflict, the conflict being the fight against your belief system, just that idea, knowing that I'm going against things that I was taught. Now, to understand the dissonance part of it, I'd like to think of as being more emotional. So when somebody is morally intact and they're doing things and things are working out right, they're doing what they can. I equate that with happiness and content, which in music would be a major tonality. So you're listening to. So that sounds very happy. So now when you add that dissonance into the equation, and it starts to create that negative emotion, that negative rub. So it sounds, and you can hear it sounds. So it's no longer harmonious. It doesn't sit well. It feels real uneasy, and it feels like it needs to be resolved back to that major tonality where things are, where you're happy, and you're comfortable again. So I just thought that when we can hear things like that, and sometimes it's easier explained, different people have different learning processes. But in my experience as a musician's mate in the Navy, I've had the opportunity to teach music classes all over the world. And we always talk about things like this, how music can create that emotional feeling, So Ray, do you have anything? I mean, you were looking at some of the stuff earlier.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate your description of that, and I was reflecting on how Navajo we're taught. We end our prayers, blessings, with a phrase, because which means everything before me will be beautiful. Which roughly means everything behind me will be beautiful. Everything beneath me will be beautiful. Everything above me will be beautiful. And which means everything all around me will be beautiful. And the last phrase is a key part, which goes, which means everything from my lips will be beautiful. And we're taught that's ingrained in our moral upbringing, in our prayers and our blessings, and that's emphasized to us to be that way. So acts of transgression are not included in very traditional Navajo systems, but we do make a transition from that. And a lot of tribes do this. We have ceremonies to have us transition to not being morally correct all the time, or morally good. We have ceremonies to transition us to take on those behaviors that require anger, violence, acts of conflict. And even that is a balance in itself. We don't go from one to the other without a real conscious way of doing it. So the beliefs of right and wrong are clear cut that way. And that's quite a bit different from the Euro-American system. You know, I remember stepping off a plane close to midnight in Fort Polk 50 years ago, and first thing I heard was drill sergeants yelling at me. You know, and that's how it is for basic. You know, your whole 8-week period in basic is people yelling at you, reminding you to be a killer. And it's a real major shift, I think, that a lot of us go through, beginning with basic training and on through the rest of our careers in the military, whether it be 2 years, 3 years, or 20 years. And the longer we stay within that kind of setting, our moral injury becomes more significant, and dissonance that comes from it becomes more significant. I don't know very, very, very many veterans who don't have degrees of conflict and dissonance upon discharge. And that's what we're hoping to go through today with everyone. So thank you for that, Dave, and we can go on.
Yeah, I do remember all the yelling from the second you step off the bus. So, you know, I kind of think of it as, you know, in the fighting against it, the fighting against your good moral development, you know, I think it's just from the music example, it's emotional disharmony, you know, you just, it's distress, emotional distress, you know, I kind of add on to that. So next slide, please. Okay. So, with the moral injury or the moral dissonance, there comes the feelings of shame and guilt because you're not upholding your own moral belief system, and it can create those feelings of shame and guilt, and what can happen with the veteran is it creates it can cause avoidance and withdrawal, and and this is where the pro-social activity will come into play, you know, to try to get the veteran back involved in the good belief system that they were raised with. So in this, in the emotional distress, you know, it can, when there's that withdrawal, it can take away from the learning experience, the creative learning experience of getting back into a world that can be a moral, you know, your idea of a world that it has a good moral place, and that the person is actually a good person, and that they will also be, you know, they'll be accepted by others, you know, because that's, you know, the shame, the guilt, and the anxiety, like it says, about the things that they've done or things that they're trained to do, is creates the idea of, I'm not going to be accepted because I'm going against these things. You know, you start to look at, well, my family's no longer going to accept me. My friends are no longer going to accept me because of what I'm doing, you know? So we're looking at the guilt side of it. It's just, you know, the painful and emotional experience that's tied with acts of transgression, of breaking that moral code and breaking that expectation that we were raised with, you know. And so the guilt is actually associated with decreased likelihood of participating in risky or illegal behaviors. Now, with the shame side of it, it creates the withdrawal. So it involves just the evaluation of self and the tendencies to avoid withdrawal. And that the withdrawal can result in more anger, decreased empathy, leading to negative life changes.
Yeah, I agree with you, Dave. I think that invariably, in my life, invariably we come home, so to speak, and among the first things that we do is isolate ourselves because we have a lot of uncertainty about how to proceed. We don't have our regular support system around us, which is our buddies in the unit that we left. We don't have that support system around us, and we're back among a different kind of strangers, which is our family, and we each end up having to try to figure out how to engage with our family members in a new and a different kind of way from the previous kind of lifestyle. And then there's guilt and shame built around that because many veterans aren't able to juggle that transition well. Yeah, we make mistakes, and we're reminded often that sometimes behaviors that we bring back to civilian life aren't appropriate, and then we feel some shame over that. It happens to newly discharged people, and then it happens to many of us who've been out for quite a while. There's a juggling act all the time, it seems like. And that moral conflict pops up a lot. And that's why this discussion we're having is really key, I think. And being ostracized for how we say things and how we don't say things is pretty common. It seems like these with many veterans that I come across, and some of them are more deeply troubled veterans end up dropping out of society altogether, getting on the streets and drinking a lot more and drugging as a way to cope. So, thank you, Dave.
Yeah. So yeah, just that withdrawal, it can create all that negative behavior. So the thing about it, so some of there's not very many studies written about moral injury. I mean, you could find it as associated with PTSD, but not many that focus in on just moral injury or moral conflict. But one of the studies that I was looking at, it discusses that there's more damage to more damaging to emotional and mental health than guilt. Shame may be a more integral part of the moral injury. So it's the shame part of that creates that withdrawal, of how others are going to look at us, how our family's going to look at us. So that injury is the only possible. It's only possible if acts of transgression are, if it produces that dissonance or that conflict. If the dissonance is, if it's not there, there's something else going on with the moral belief system, or they may have a moral belief system that's intact, and that's that resilience factor, and I know we've discussed in other trainings, other webs about that resilience factor. Some adjust very well, and some won't have that moral conflict. So, and it could come from just either traditional healing and the way the preparation is before one goes into the military, or maybe maybe the person has experienced a lot of trauma in their life and they're just kind of numb to it, you know, and it just doesn't bother them anymore, you know. But just to be able to evaluate that shame and that guilt, and treatment providers, you know, that's something that can be kind of teased out, to be separated from feelings from actual PTSD, because they do share they do share some things, and the moral injury and PTSD are, you know, they're two separate things, but they do share some attributes, you know, like PTSD is usually there's a threatening event that goes on. Moral injury doesn't necessarily have to have a threatening event that has happened. It's just the idea of that can create the moral injury. And then PTSD, just re-experiencing, can trigger that PTSD that may not necessarily happen with moral injury. So some of the things that they do have in common, like we were just talking, the avoidance and the withdrawal, denial, sleep issues, substance use, the guilt and the shame, the anger, distrust, a negative view of self, social problems, trust issues, spiritual changes. So the behavioral health specialist can start looking at things like that, because when a person with deep moral injury withdraws, they start to show signs that look a lot like PTSD, you know. And so it's good to try to tease that out through the MI process, to see where it's actually coming from. Ray, got anything more on that?
Yeah, I was going to mention also that if folks have questions or would like to give examples of their own experiences, you know, feel free to do that. You raise your hand, make a point in chat, and we can have a discussion about this. It's not a one-way conversation from us to everyone else, but you know, we have a good audience there, and veterans among us who can also talk about what Dave and I are sharing, probably more eloquently, or some of these English words are just tongue twisters, or even with good examples. So that's how I wanted to mention that also. If someone could say that word for me better, let me know also.
Eloquently, is that what you meant?
That might be it. Yeah, it sounds close enough. And yeah, assimilation is an ongoing process for veterans. We most of us don't fully assimilate, you know, and who doesn't go around checking their line these days still, or checking their buttons these days? You know, who doesn't? Very few people do that. Very few people don't do that. You know, knowing how to stand at ease and appropriately the way we're taught is something we carry with us. Waking up early, having that command voice, and sometimes inappropriate settings happens, and those are the things that occur. But and you know, I was talking to one of my brothers the other day, and he's a civilian, and he says, "What's the main thing?" He asked me, "What's the main thing I learned?" I said, "I learned how to kill." Yeah, this is 50 years later, and he said basically sometimes it comes out. He told me, you know, and we experienced these these dilemmas of dissonance sometimes among internally, and it takes so much work to contain it all, to keep it in check. And our younger ones, especially, who are freshly out, because they're still moving through that process and stumbling. And so I think this is a really good section around how moral conflict and PTSD do have symptomology that they're quite similar sometimes. And it's a matter of teasing it out and figuring out what is really going on with a young person or even an older vet when they come to us for a talk about the feelings that they're having and having some challenges resolving. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's one of the things. It's sometimes they don't talk about the shame and the guilt. You know, when that could be the crux of the issue. You know, so okay, next slide. Yeah, so the avoidance and the withdrawal. Yeah, that's that was something that we mentioned earlier as well. So yeah, just the integration into getting back involved, with that brotherhood, the camaraderie. So next slide. Okay, the pro-social behaviors. Okay, now just looking at pro-social itself, so the way you kind of look at it is engaging in the opposite action of what shame would suggest doing. So in the shame, you withdraw, you avoid. So just doing the opposite is getting back involved, in the service of others, because that's one of the things you're taught in the military, you're serving others, and looking at, approaching rather than withdraw. And this can results in just a reduction in shame, when you're building back that idea of what you were raised with, that idea of taking care of others and helping others and taking care of the land. And so just, repeated exposure to that, will help alleviate that feeling of shame. And, because if you keep ruminating on that idea of shame, that's when the negative behaviors become more prevalent. Substance coping, things that you do to end up in negative legal situations. So you're looking at the things that are forgiveness promoting, I guess would be the way to word it, to give you that idea, that I'm not a bad person. It's just I was in a different situation that goes against my moral standards, but I'm not in that anymore. So now taking the steps to alleviate that.
While we're here, David, let me take some time and introduce Sean Bear,
Cool.
our esteemed brother from Meskwaki country is here. Go ahead, Sean, introduce yourself and
Hello, my name is Sean Bear from Musqueam tribe in Iowa. My Indian name is Keel Cook. I work at the National American Indian and Alaska Native ATTC. Sorry.
I think I can relate that um, pro-social behavior has really been a lifesaver. And personally, like you, Dave, I one of my early behaviors that I adopted was sports. I began playing softball early on, and then and also creating work relationships is really key. So a lot of them were positive and definitely helpful, and expanded my socialization and friendships beyond uh, the buddies that I had made and really connected with well. It was a lot different 50 years ago. We didn't have Facebook, social media to stay in connection with each other like today. And so when you left your unit and discharged out, basically you essentially lost contact with everyone. But sports was really a major has become a major part of my life early on, as a player, and then as a coach and a manager, and then and on through the 90s and 80s, 90s and 2000s as a coach of youth teams. Having done that, I did that for almost 25 years actually, coaching, and really become a big part of my social life is coaching, not umpiring like you, but coaching. And these days, engage in a lot of ceremonial activities here on Navajo, and help out families with ceremonial functions. So this is kind of a transition that's happened over the years, but I'm really glad that we have this chance to discuss this with people.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and move to the next slide. And the next one after this. So promoting social interaction, the camaraderie, getting back to the camaraderie, things can be done, you can be talked about in the therapeutic process or in the courtroom or with probation, but it's putting it into action. It's getting out and being involved in these things, is where that's where the recovery is going to happen, and that's one of the things I used to discuss with my clients. It's like, the recovery doesn't happen inside this room right here. The recovery happens when you walk out that door. And that's when the things that are discussed in here, that's when you put all these things into action. You find out what's working well, what doesn't work, or things that you need to pay more attention to. So so one of the things, just being involved in pro-social activities, just to break the isolation, and to start looking for things that fit the pro-social activity that's going to fit what what your interests are. And really starting to deal with the complex factors of what transitioning out of the military is like, because there's a lot of little things that you don't think about when you're on active duty, that once you get on the other side, then they start to become present, and it starts to create a little bit of frustration at getting back into integrating back into civilian life. So let's the next slide. Okay, so yeah, so discharging, it's different, and you have to include family members too. If the veteran is married and has kids too, they're going to have to go through. They're going to be facing a change as well, because everything, you're going from a highly structured and regimented culture, military culture, to one that's well, a little more relaxed, if just a little. And there's going to be values and norms that you're not going to see anymore, that you've learned and that you even taught your kids, you know. It's just, you know, the certain protocol and stuff that you learn as a service member and that your family learns. It's like, if you've ever been on a military base, and I think I've seen some of these videos on YouTube, but on a military base, when you see all these kids playing on the playground in the afternoon after school, and then evening colors comes on, all the kids come to a stop. They stop playing, and they'll either stand at attention or they'll put their hand over their heart, or during colors. And that's something that, like, my kids, they grew up like that. That's what they know. So they know that when something that they learned is that when the national anthem is sounded, they stop what they're doing, and they either come to attention or they put their hand over their heart. And that's just one of the things that they've learned. And when you transition out, you don't see that. You know, you don't see that in society. There's certain things. I mean, if you've ever been to a ball game and the national anthem sounds, you know, you don't see, you know, there's still a lot of movement around, but, you know, in the military culture, everything stops, you know. The other thing is like living in military housing, you know, the care that you take, because it's not your house, you know. You're living there while you're stationed there, but the kids learn to take care of things, you know, and just because out of respect that the military is allowing us to stay there while we're on duty there, and then that those norms, you know, they trickle out into the community, the way just the courtesy that you offer other people, you know, the way you conduct yourself in public. And then one of the things that, one of the challenges is the transfers, when military members transfer. I get this feeling, my kids got this feeling, is that when we moved to Albuquerque and we had been here for about 4 years, everybody starts to get antsy, you know, because it feels like it's time to transfer again. And it just so happened that, you know, my daughter was graduating from college at that time. My son was about halfway through high school. He was getting kind of antsy. My daughter ended up moving to Washington State, back up to where we were stationed before. I had another daughter that moved to Oklahoma. My son, he couldn't wait for graduation so he could move, you know, because they all told me, they said, it really feels like it's time to transfer again, you know. And you know, so I was telling them, see, you guys get to transfer. I just bought a house, so I kind of have to stay here right now. You know, so just little things like that, you know. One of the other challenges too, discharge types, you know, honorable, other than honorable, dishonorable, general discharges. These all have effect on the veteran's future. You know, it's going to affect their entitlements, you know, their for VA benefits, or whether education is going to be paid for. So Ray or Sean, you got anything to add to that?
Yes, Sean, I do. I know transitioning home was very difficult, and I know that it seems to me anyway that the longer you're in the military, the harder it is to come back. And everything seems so chaotic. I mean, there was no order to anything. I mean, people don't listen or follow the rules and such that you're so used to in the military. And I mean, we were so used to order. We knew exactly what we were doing from the time we woke up to the time we went to sleep. And then you get outside, and if you don't have a job right away, of course, then it's probably a little bit more difficult. I arranged a job before I ever got out. So, I mean, pretty much 2 days after I got home, I was already working. But it was a little bit difficult. And I know that it must have been kind of strange for the children at the time, because they were so used to a certain type of life, and all of a sudden you come home and it's definitely a little bit different. And it's a little safer too when you're on the military base.
Definitely.
Everybody around, it's kind of like how native families are. I mean, people watching each other's kids in a sense, making sure everybody else is okay. Moving from home to home, that can be difficult. But then it's very different once you do get home, because it's such a different way of life once you get back. And children may have never been there before. So it's a very new environment. Sometimes it's you didn't want to come back to. So
I see one of the comments from Terry about the weekend warriors. When I went to the University of New Mexico, that's one of the things that my veterans advisor, they encourage all veterans to hang out at the student vets office, because it's like being in the military. You walk in, you show your ID, you sign in. They have a kitchen that's full of, they have water, sodas. The fridge is full of food. You can make popcorn or have a sandwich or whatever, but that veterans group used to have, it has every the beginning of every year, it has a veterans retreat, where they'll take a long weekend, like 3 or 4 days to go out, and they camp. And they have all kinds of activities planned, so these veterans can be integrated, so they can get back into that camaraderie. So yes, that's a very good idea, and that falls in line with all the pro-social stuff, that we're going to get into here in just a second. So go ahead and change the slide. Yeah, so understanding and abiding, but yeah, this is the kind of stuff Sean was just talking about, just looking at just different things that happen in civilian life, man, that are different, coexisting with cultures, values, and norms, that are not those of the military. Relationships with family and friends. Let's go to the next slide. Finding a new career, Sean mentioned, but you get something set up before, pursuing higher education, making sure that if you're eligible, if you've signed up for the GI Bill, making sure that you that you can follow that path. Yeah, Ray, the language, the military language, and that's the other thing about, like, when you apply for a job, whatever your job is in the military, it doesn't translate very well to a civilian world. It's like my Navy enlisted codes are 3809 and 3853. That means absolutely nothing to a civilian employer. When you tell them I was a 3853, what is that? Well, that's a unit leader. What is that? What is a unit leader? Then there's a long description of what a unit leader's skill level is, or what you're responsible for, whatever rank you are, on all these different jobs, yeah, locating a new home. It's like when I got out, I had no place to live. I just knew where I was going. So on my way to Albuquerque, my mom lives in Winslow. Me and my wife, we just drove through Winslow and dropped the kids off. And then we drove to Albuquerque and spent a week here looking for a house, and just trying to get things set up, so we could move this way, and then when we get here, we have to wait for everything, the people to move out, and everybody for them to get the house ready. So we have a whole month of no place to live. So we went to Texas to stay with my in-laws for a month, and when you move into your in-laws house for a month, that's not comfortable either, so it's these transitioning things that that can be difficult.
I think for many of our younger veterans, one of the major transitions is that, when you're stationed with a unit of, when you're living in the barracks, everything you own is right there. It's in a locker and a foot locker. It's where everything you own is compact. So you can shove it in a duffel bag and a backpack and move. For a young soldier, it's like that. And when you leave the military, you have everything your own around you. You carry your backpack in a bag with you home. And when you get home, everything you own is around you, but everything around you in the home is not yours. And as much as family members can try to tell a young vet, this is your home, feel free to use what you can, and that opening up to a new kind of lifestyle, I think, is a transition that can be difficult for young veterans coming out. And you're used to just carrying what you have and living that way.
Yeah.
And when you do come across possessions of some kind, invariably young veterans will give it back away because they think, okay, what can I carry with me if I decide to move, kind of thinking. And with young veterans, the option of finding new careers is pretty challenging. That's why with a lot of young veterans, the unemployment rates are really high. Because it's getting into a new job role, like you said, Dave. Your MOS doesn't mean anything to people. And if you have an MOS that is, being able to shoot a howitzer, for example, and you do it really well, it doesn't translate into civilian life. It doesn't translate, and that's where a lot of our young veterans, I think, struggle, is finding a different kind of work that they can be settled in while they're dealing with moral injury and moral dissonance early on. And a good thing we have a GI Bill that can help, but with young veterans in particular who are coming out and socialized differently, it can be a challenge to get into a career that's helpful on the line and get into college or local university. The thought of owning a home as a young veteran, I think, is a lot more distant than and younger veterans end up having to move home with their parents or with a sibling as the alternative to not being able to find a new home right now. So I look at this discussion and I relate it to how I see a lot of young veterans experience their discharges. I saw back home with our local veterans group, a lot of our young veterans are struggling with just getting a basic job in an environment where jobs are really scarce. In rural reservations, jobs are scarce, and you really got to hustle and hustle and hustle without a car sometimes to do these things. And this is something that I really work at keeping in mind when I meet young veterans, is figuring out what are some of their short-term objectives to be able to become self-sustaining, let alone self-sufficient, and be able to have conversations with them in a way that can be more useful, as opposed to having a goal that you need to get a home, kind of talk, because it's not a reality for a lot of young veterans. And that's a challenge that I think exists with our younger ones that we'd really need to be cognizant of. So thank you for that opportunity, Dave.
Yeah. So yeah, time is getting short. So can we change the slide? Next slide. we've already kind of covered some of this stuff. Starting over. Yeah, so that's one of the things too about the change is you're afforded some of these things, that some of the respect. You're no longer called by your rank anymore. You're called, which is something you become used to. It's just it's an identity shift. So let's go to the next slide. So all this, what we've been talking about, and this transitioning process, all at the same time trying to deal with moral injury and possible diagnosis of PTSD, all this happening at the same time, and then plus losing that part of your military service, not being able to go on base anymore. If you're near a base, you can't get onto a military base anymore. Me being retired, I have an active ID, so I can go back. I can go on to Kirtland Air Force Base and just be in that atmosphere. Again, I go over there and I use their parade field to run, or walk around, and color sounds. It keeps me in touch with that whole thing. I can use the exchange and the commissary. So if you have somebody in your community and you live near a base and that has access, they can sponsor military veterans onto the military base, and sometimes that's therapeutic in itself, to just to be included again back in that military atmosphere, so you could organize a group of people, hey, we're going to go onto the base and go to the gym, or go to the go to the track, or go to the commissary, or go to the exchange or something, but just to look around, but maybe get a good haircut. So next slide. Okay, so getting into the pro-social, the actual activities. So it can be worked out like with the treatment provider and the wellness court, the veterans court team members. They can work with the individual to find out what their interests are, if getting back involved with the camaraderie and the brotherhood and everything, to find out what the veterans' interests, where they lie, so they can gravitate towards something that's going to help them. It's going to be beneficial for them. And usually when I've worked with clients in the past, we generally talk about, when we're talking about doing community service or whatever, I always ask them, look back to your childhood, look back to your younger days before all the chaos. What were you good at? What was rewarding to you? What were you successful at? Because if they were good for you then, they're probably still good for you now. And granted, like if some of it was sports, maybe, you're not as athletic as you used to be, but you can be involved in that somehow, and I've had, I had a wellness, a wellness court participant that was always involved in high school sports, football, and basketball. And one of the things that he went out and tried is at the football game at Laguna, they had a home game, and he went and he volunteered to be he had hold the downs marker on the sideline. And he came back and he told me what that felt like. He was very excited about it. It was very exhilarating because it put him back on the field like when he was in high school, because he says he was a good football player in high school, and it got him back out on the field and it got him involved. Even if it was just tracking the downs, it brought that feeling back. And so so we discussed, that's something that you can keep being involved in. That's what's going to replace all the chaos. And the other thing too is he was a good basketball player, so he started coaching youth basketball on the reservation, and he got a lot of joy out of that. And the one obstacle though that sometimes comes up when you're participating in these reservation activities is background checks. That was one of the things that we kind of had an issue with, and we had to try to talk to the judge about, and maybe there's something that we can do that where they can be allowed to participate in certain things, because of their background check. Their background check's probably not going to come back good. So sometimes they're not allowed to participate in certain things. So that can kind of be hashed out through the legal system. That's one of the things that's beyond their control. So that was the other thing we have to discuss. So tribal veterans organizations. I know at Laguna they have a veterans organization there, a veterans society, and I know that they also have a Marine Corps group out there, and each group they do different things throughout the year, and whenever there's feast is happening out there, whatever, they always have a booth. I always see those guys sitting around, and gives them a chance to tell some more stories, or gives everybody a chance to interact. One of the things that I got involved with when, I had always been involved in baseball all my life. From 2nd grade to 12th grade, I played baseball. And when I got out of when I was still in the Navy, one of the things that I went through a recovery I went through recovery treatment back in 2005. So one of the activities when I transferred 2006, there's things missing from my life. So one of the things I gravitated towards back was baseball. And so I started coaching. I coached my son's team for a few years. And then we moved to Albuquerque here, and I coached here. And then after, when he decided he wasn't going to play anymore, I became an umpire. I went to umpire school, and one of the things I discovered when I went to umpire school is the camaraderie and the brotherhood is really, really strong and really tight. And it was like, it was like finding that thing again, and they talk about that, very strongly with the brotherhood. And so one of the programs that that's New Mexico Activities Association has been promoting is there's a program called Battlefields to Ball Fields, and it's geared towards veterans becoming high school officials. And what that program does is they will buy all your equipment that you need to become an official. And then the local veterans, they will provide all the training for you for free. All the vet has to do is show up, and show the interest, and then all the help is there. They're going to help this person transfer into that brotherhood, and become part of that, so they can get that camaraderie back, So Ray or Sean, is it, I'm going to jump in on this one too.
Yeah, I will. Yeah, there's something that really helped me is once I returned, I really kind of isolated myself, and it was probably about 3 or 4 months after I got back. I was probably pretty depressed and didn't realize it. I ended up seeing medicine peoples. And then after a bit, I began to travel this certain medicine person about every weekend. After about a year and a half, I ended up staying with a medicine person and his wife for about 14, 15, 16 months. And I stayed up there, and it was really great for me. I mean, fasting became a lot easier for me. I mean, even when it was raining or anything like that, I was kind of accustomed to nature. I actually kind of went more within myself differently than I was before, to learn more about myself, learn more about people, learn more about others, learn more about life. And it really helped me to cope with things, because learning from a different point of view that I had never looked at before. And during that time, I had learned so much that I was able to kind of break free from a lot of the restraints in a sense that returning home kind of put upon me. And it really helped me.
Okay, does anybody have any questions? We got just a couple of minutes left.
I had one for you, David. This is Jordan. I was wondering, so I'm getting a lot out of this discussion on examples of pro-social activities, and it's particularly helpful to hear what you all have experienced. I'm wondering, for like a wellness court practitioner, if you had any advice on finding specific pro-social activities that would be individualized to a participant based on their own interest, if you have any experience with that.
I think just finding out what's available, and doing some research, because there's different things. I mean, a lot of it's posted on different websites. The VA has the VA sponsored groups. You can look on community boards, for the area that you're in, to see what's going on. One of the things veterans are good at is word of mouth, just as we say, passing the word, so yeah, so just being able to look around, and that can be done with the help of your treatment provider, or the probation officer that you have, or you can research that right there in the office. You can start looking around to see what's available in the area, what's accessible, and then some online type things like Together We Serve is one of the things. They have one for each. They have a section for each branch, and you put in your information, and then it comes up with whatever duty station you served from the time that you served there. It'll come up with it'll show you all the people that are on that website that are signed up during that time and at that particular place. Like the people I went to boot camp with, there's a lot of people I went to boot camp with that are signed up on there. Different duty stations I was at. There are a lot of, you can go back and get re in touch with those people. One of the other things I discovered when I got out was the Navy Musicians Association. I didn't know they had an association. I found out when I got out. So, and that has a lot of old people that I haven't seen in years. On that site.
Thank you so much for that, David. Now we'll leave the line open and the comments box open as well, should anybody have for a few minutes. I've also dropped in TLPI's session evaluation link. Please do complete that evaluation at your convenience. We use that information to improve future workshops and for ideas for future events. I did want to thank David, Ray, and Sean again for sharing your experiences and perspectives today. It's been a really, really helpful discussion throughout this week's veterans portion of our training. One administrative note, we did go through a slide that this event was funded by the Department of Justice, Bureau of Justice Assistance. Now it was funded, our event was funded by the DOJ, however, views expressed in our workshops do not necessarily reflect the views of the Bureau of Justice Assistance. Recordings of all of our sessions, including veterans-related training content, will remain up in the virtual conference space until July 30th. And after this time, you can find our recordings at enhancementtraining.org. We'll additionally be reconvening for our second set of afternoon breakout sessions at 1:15 p.m. Pacific time. Today's second set of afternoon sessions will feature a Tribal Healing to Wellness Court talking circle facilitated by my colleague Chris Pacheco, and an additional session on creating more effective collaborations to serve families involved in the justice system. Once again, to Sean, Ray, and David, Cheme Gwich, and thank you so much, and thank you to our audience as well for attending today's workshop.
Thanks, Ray. Thanks, Sean.
Enjoy seeing everybody again. You guys take care, and thank you to everyone for joining us this fine day. And take care of yourselves and enjoy the weather. Yeah.
Bye. 2 shots.